If you aren't living in an environment that suits you and resonates with the deepest parts of your psyche, then you're letting yourself down, and it's going to be really hard to live up to your potential. In 1975, there was this cultural epidemic happening in America. The war in Vietnam was just ending, and the powers that be were concerned that there was going to be all these soldiers coming home who were going to be heroin junkies, because while they were in Vietnam, there were a lot of them that were using a lot of heroin. But that didn't happen. What actually happened was only 1% of these soldiers came back and ever used heroin again. This was because of their environment. They were in a obviously horrible environment. It was unsuitable to good mental health, and they used heroin as a coping mechanism. But when they came back to the States, they were with their family and friends, living life how they wanted to live it, and they just cut heroin out cold turkey. It's kind of crazy, because from what I can understand, heroin is a hell of a drug that is next to impossible to kick. Likely because people who try to get off of it go right back into the environments that condone that type of behavior. So let's apply this to our own living. I mean, I'm sure there's an instance that you've been in, or maybe you're currently in it, where it's undesirable and you wish you didn't have to be in that environment. The truth is that you don't have to be in that environment. You can leave that environment. If you've been following around here for a while, you've heard me talk about my photo and video business. I started it in 2019, and something I haven't really talked too much about is the studio that I had for a while. In about 2021, 2022, I found this photo studio. It was a 1,200 square foot industrial unit, and I invested $40,000 into renovating it to make it my dream studio. You know, this would take a normal person their entire career potentially to get, and I managed to do it in 3 or 4 years, and I was miserable. I remember just standing in it one day and looking around and thinking, is this it? You know, I felt underwhelmed and disappointed that it wasn't everything that I thought that it was going to be, and this was because of my environment. If I had built that studio in some city that actually resonated with me, that I was really excited about being in, then I'm sure I would have been over the moon. But that wasn't the case. It was in my hometown, and I felt like my hometown was suffocating me. I felt uninspired. I felt like I was letting myself down, like I wasn't living up to my potential. And so I left. I told my fiance, after a lot of thought and meditation on the idea, that we were gonna move to Muskoka. I didn't know why I wanted to move to Muskoka at all. I just knew in my gut that it was where I wanted us to be. And so after taking a little layover for 2 years, a little bit south of Muskoka because I got hurt, we finally made it here. And I am feeling my most calm, my most happy I have ever felt. And I'm doing my best work as well. I feel inspired and energized, and it just feels right. And I don't regret much in my life, but I do think back and wonder why I hadn't done something like this earlier. You know, just said to myself, well, why don't you just live where you want to live, instead of going on these stints elsewhere and then always returning home to my comfort zone. Because this Muskoka thing, it's not an isolated instance. There were many times in my life when I went somewhere else and felt amazing and on top of the world, and I would come back to my hometown. When I was 18, I went to university for 4 years. Those have become some of the most memorable times in my life. When I was in my early to mid 20s, I lived in Muskoka actually for a year or so. Great time of my life. And then a few years after that, I drove out west for a year and a half, and that was where I really woke up and I decided I wanted to be a photographer, and I called my photography mentor and told him I wanted to do what he does, and he told me that I could work with him when I got back home. A lot happened when I was out west in that different environment. But after I lived in all these other places and went back to my hometown, it was like clockwork. It was always the same thing. I would be excited when I first got home. I would hang out with my friends. I would feel the nostalgia of recognizing the streets that I drive down. And then I would just be filled with this existential dread. Eventually, I would just not have any interest in being in that environment. Now, maybe you haven't been in an experience like this, like with the hometown thing. Maybe you love your hometown, and that's awesome. But it is applicable to other instances in your life. Maybe you don't like the house that you're living in, the romantic relationship that you're in, the job that you're working. And the only thing that is keeping you in that position, in that environment that's not suited to you, is fear. It's fear of the unknown, fear of judgment, fear of failure. The best thing that you can do for yourself is to face those fears, which is easier said than done, but there are a number of things that you can do to help you build up the strength to be able to face any fears that you come across. Because most of the time, they're not real. They're all in your head. Michael Jordan said, you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. And so it's good to remember, what's the worst thing that's gonna happen? If you leave your job and go start another one, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? If you leave the place you're living and go live in another one, it doesn't work out, what is the worst thing that is going to happen? You're going to have your fingers and toes, you're going to be breathing and alive to make some other choice. Life is a series of good decisions and bad decisions. We need to make an average of good decisions mostly, and whenever you make bad ones, you just learn from that choice and then make a better one next time. So when you're trying to build up the strength and the energy required to be able to face your fears, one exercise you can do is get a pen and a piece of paper, go somewhere where you're not going to be interrupted for 25 minutes or so, and just write down 5 things that you've done in your life that were scary and you did them anyways. Whether it was getting up to say a speech in school when you were a kid, learning how to play guitar and then playing in a band on a stage, playing a sport, taking a chance on a new job, not knowing how it's gonna work out, even asking somebody out. Write these things down and fill yourself with energy and enthusiasm and remind yourself of how bold you actually are deep down. Another thing that you can do is look at the failures and successes of others. So anybody that you look up to, whether it's an athlete, musician, actor, business person, they've all had so many failures along the way, and they're not always talked about, but you can definitely find them, whether it's in video form or maybe one of their books or something. Just look at the stories of others to level you out and help you understand, like, it's okay to feel scared of stuff, but do it anyway, Once you've filled yourself with this feeling of courage and you know you can tackle your fears, now it's time to make a plan. So same thing, pen and piece of paper, 25 minutes alone, and you're gonna write out your plan. And you're gonna do a quarterly plan for this year, and then you're gonna do the whole year, what you wish to accomplish, then 2 to 5 years and 10 years, and write everything down. Write the kind of career you want to be in, the kind of life partner you want to be with, if you want that, if you want kids or not, the kind of house you're going to live in, the city you're going to live in, what are your hobbies, what have you accomplished, who are your friends. You're going to write all this out, and you're not going to hold back or start to write something and stop yourself because you think it's going to be too challenging. Write down everything that you want attached to time limits, including the amount of money you want to be earning. And once you've decided how you want to change your environment, because that's what that exercise is making ideas physical, it's time to actually take action. So if you don't like your job, say, don't quit, but start to find things to be grateful for in that work. Start to express gratitude towards that job. Everything that sucks still has something to be grateful for. Say instead of that job, you want to be a cooking YouTuber. Like you like watching YouTube videos about cooking. So just start doing it. Set up a camera and film yourself cooking and then post it. And then do that a bunch of times. As you do that more and more, you'll start to level up the production value and the effort that you can put into it. It's as simple as that, but you're never gonna get there if you don't start. The same strategy can be used in an environment that you don't want to be in that doesn't have to do with your job. So it could be maybe the house that you're living in or a partner that you're with. If you don't want to live in your house, just start looking at listings and see what happens. If you don't want to be with your partner anymore, just start to imagine what life would be like without them and see what happens. Now say you're like me and you don't want to live in your hometown anymore. You have to recognize why it's so difficult to leave. It's difficult to leave because of nostalgia. There's a lot of nostalgia attached to your hometown. When my father passed away, I lost more than just my dad. I lost our childhood home because we had to sell it. And I also lost our family cottage because we gave it to our older brother, Mikey. And that was hard. It was an extremely difficult decision to make because it felt nostalgic. It felt good. Nostalgia feels good. But the thing to remember is that nostalgia is always connected to people. So another thing that happens in your hometown is you get older, it can be easy to hold on to the past. You know, those good times you had when you were in your 20s and you were drinking and partying and having a good time and just hanging out with your friends. That ends because friends start families and they follow their careers and life gets busy and that ends. That nostalgia is dead. And effectively, if the environment itself without the people present doesn't suit you anymore, you have to leave. If it doesn't do anything for you, then you're only degrading your quality of life by staying in that environment. But when you move to a new environment, you need to develop new nostalgia, right? Nostalgia, again, is connected to people mainly. Yes, there are, you know, in your hometown, you drive down a street and it feels good, but that's because you experience that with people. So if you move into a new town, but you're, you know, maybe you're my age or a little younger even, I'm 35. As you get older, it becomes kind of a weird thing to like make new friends. Because when you're younger, you were drinking, you're just having fun and living. But then you get older and it's like, where's the time? You know, I gotta work and there's bills and there's the house and there's a wife or husband and kids maybe. Like there's just so much going on. So how do you make, you know, new connections with people so you can develop these new nostalgic feelings? If you aren't someone who, you know, plays recreational sports or something like pickleball or some shit, you know, how do you do this? For me, it is involved in my career because I do work that I love. I'm a photographer and a videographer. That allows me to interact with people that I have a lot in common with. I love business and I work with business owners. Some of these business owners have become good friends of mine. I love photography and video, and I've become very close friends with other photographers and videographers, and they are my new nostalgia. Beyond that, if you're in a new town, a new environment, you have to get out into your community and participate and meet strangers that you don't have anything in common with and get to work building a new life for yourself in this new environment that you chose. Living in an environment that resonates with the deepest parts of your psyche is a choice. Remember these soldiers in Vietnam. They were addicted to heroin while they were at war. They came home and they went cold turkey off heroin. It boggles my mind that that happened. And there's a lot to take from that when we're thinking about our own environments. Being a young man fighting in a jungle and fighting for your life every day pushes you to use heroin, say. Living in a town that makes you feel dead inside and unfulfilled and uninspired, makes you overeat, overconsume, and feel depressed. Removing yourself from that environment is the obvious answer if you want to live the life that you deserve to live.